My name is Amelia, I'm 30, and on my 30th birthday, I found out my fiancé was marrying my sister. Before I tell you about the lawsuit that tore my family apart, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Thank you for being here, and I hope you're having a good day. Let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's nice to know I'm not just talking into the void, you know? It helps. It really does. My story starts on a Tuesday. The day I turned 30. The day my life, as I knew it, ended. I was sitting on my sofa, in the dead quiet of my apartment. The silence was the loudest thing in the room. It was supposed to be a night filled with laughter, with the clinking of glasses and the warmth of people I loved. Instead, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. I was mindlessly scrolling through my phone, trying to numb the hollow ache in my chest. A notification popped up. A tag in a photo. I tapped on it without thinking. And there it was. The picture was beautiful, professionally done. Soft light, white roses everywhere. My younger sister, Olivia, was in the center, wearing a stunning white lace gown. A bride. For a split second, I felt a confusing pang of hurt. She was getting married and didn't even tell me? And then I saw the groom. My blood ran cold. It felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. He was standing beside her, his hand on her waist, beaming a smile I knew better than my own. It was Ethan. My Ethan. My fiancé. The phone felt slick in my hand. I couldn't breathe. I zoomed in, my thumb shaking so badly I could barely control it. It was him. The same dark hair, the same strong jaw, the same blue eyes that had promised me forever just last week over dinner. The silence in the room wasn't quiet anymore, it was screaming. Just hours before, I had been standing in a sun-drenched garden in Napa Valley, surrounded by empty chairs. I had spent 6 months planning my 30th birthday party. It was meant to be a celebration, a milestone. I'd booked this beautiful little venue with fairy lights strung between old oak trees. 50 chairs, 50 place settings, a cake with lemon and lavender that cost a small fortune. And no one came. First, my mother, Carol, had called that morning. Her voice was dripping with fake sympathy. "Oh, honey, something terrible has come up," she'd said. "A family emergency. Your father and I have to handle it. We are so sorry to miss your big day." A family emergency. The words sounded rehearsed, hollow. My father, Richard, didn't even bother to call. A single text message, "Can't make it. Talk later." My sister, Olivia? I called her 3 times. Each time, it went straight to voicemail. The deepest cut, though, came from Ethan. He'd called me from the airport the day before. I could hear the tinny sound of boarding calls in the background. "Babe, I am so sorry," he'd said, his voice laced with convincing regret. "This client in Chicago, they moved the meeting up. It's a huge deal for my promotion. I'll be back Friday, and I'll make it up to you, I swear. I already have your gift." I believed him. Of course, I did. He was the man I was building a life with. We had a joint savings account, money we'd been putting away since we left college, our own little college fund that had grown into a down payment for a house. He was my future. His promotion was our promotion. So I told him I understood. I told him to be safe. I stood in that empty garden for an hour, making excuses to the caterer, my cheeks burning with humiliation. I paid them, told them to donate the food, and drove home in a daze, the expensive cake sitting untouched on the passenger seat. Now, staring at the photo on my phone, the pieces clicked into place with a horrifying, brutal clarity. The fake sympathy in my mother's voice. My father's curt text. Olivia's silence. The client meeting in Chicago. The business trip. The family emergency. It wasn't 2 different lies. It was one. One single, perfectly coordinated plan, and I was the only one not in on it. My hand started to shake, not from sadness, but from something cold and sharp coiling in my gut. I looked at his smiling face in the photo, at the man who had kissed me goodbye 2 days ago, and my thumb hovered over the call button on his contact. My thumb was still hovering over his name, a tiny icon of a smiling man who didn't exist, when my phone buzzed to life in my hand. It wasn't him. It was my mother. For a second, a stupid, hopeful part of me thought, she's calling to explain. There's a reason for all this. I answered, my voice a dry whisper. Hello? Amelia, honey. Oh, thank God you answered. Her voice was a performance, thick with manufactured tears and frantic concern. We were so worried. We just heard about Olivia and Ethan. I just stared at the wall, the phone feeling heavy as a brick in my hand. You just heard? I repeated, my voice flat. Yes. Honey, it's all just a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. She was sobbing now, the kind of dramatic, heaving sobs she used to pull out when my dad was angry about her credit card bills. Listen to me. Ethan told us, he told all of us, that you two had broken up months ago. He said it was mutual, that you both wanted different things but were staying friends. We had no idea you still thought you were together. A hot flash crawled up my neck. The audacity of it, the sheer, calculated cruelty of the lie, was breathtaking. I could almost picture them all sitting around the dinner table, nodding along as Ethan spun his story, painting me as the delusional ex-girlfriend. We didn't break up, Mom, I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. Oh, you poor thing, she cooed, her voice dripping with pity that felt like acid. He completely fooled you. And he fooled us. Olivia is heartbroken that this might hurt you. She loves her new husband so much, but she was so afraid of how you'd react. That's why they kept the wedding small and quiet. Small and quiet? The photos I was looking at were from a lavish affair at one of the most expensive venues in the state. Caterers, a 12-piece band, hundreds of guests. My empty party in Napa had cost a fraction of their small and quiet wedding. Mom, I said, my voice getting dangerously low. Where did they get the money for that wedding? There was a slight pause. Oh, Ethan's been doing so well at his job. That new promotion came with a wonderful bonus, a much better salary than he had before. He's taking such good care of Olivia. He insisted on paying for everything himself, to show your father he could provide for her. A new thought, cold and sharp as a shard of glass, pierced through my shock. His job. Our future. Our money. While my mother kept babbling about misunderstandings and how I needed to be the bigger person for my sister's happiness, my other hand was already moving. I swiped out of my photo gallery and opened my banking app. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tapped in the password to our joint savings account. The one we'd named our future. The screen loaded. My breath hitched. I felt the blood drain from my face. The balance at the top of the screen read, $47.13. It had been over $80,000 just last week. $80,000 of my own savings from my salary since I was 22, of gifted inheritance money from my grandparents, of years of scrimping and saving. My half of our future. All of it. Gone. Amelia? Are you there, honey? Don't shut us out, my mother pleaded on the phone. I didn't hear her anymore. I was just scrolling, my thumb moving mechanically down a long list of transactions. Withdrawal, $5,000. Withdrawal, $10,000. Another and another. And then, at the bottom, dated just 4 days ago, was the final, devastating blow. A wire transfer. $50,000. The memo line contained a single, sickening phrase, venue deposit, ONE wedding. Olivia and Ethan. He hadn't just paid for the wedding with his money. He'd paid for it with mine. With my dreams. My mother's words about his promotion and his bonus weren't just a lie, they were the cover story for a heist. They had all watched him do it. They had celebrated on my stolen dime. "Honey, your father and I want to help you through this," my mother's voice chirped in my ear, oblivious. "We can all sit down and talk when they get back from their honeymoon in Italy." Something inside me snapped. The grief, the shock, the hurt, it all burned away, leaving behind something cold and hard and clear. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't scream. I just pressed the red button on the screen, cutting her off mid-sentence. I stared at the banking app, at the mocking little number representing the ashes of my life. They hadn't just stolen my fiancé. They had stolen my future. Every penny of it. For a long time, I just sat there. The phone lay on the cushion next to me, feeling toxic, radioactive. The silence rushed back in, heavier this time, suffocating. It felt like I was at the bottom of the ocean. The pressure was immense. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. Then, a single, choked sob escaped my lips. And then another. The dam broke. I slid off the sofa onto the floor and curled into a ball, pressing my forehead against the rough carpet. The kind of weeping that tears you apart from the inside out took over. It was a physical pain, a hollow ache in my chest that felt like it would split me in two. Every lie they had ever told me, every time my mother had praised Olivia while criticizing me, every time my father had lipped through me, every broken promise from Ethan, it all came crashing down on me at once. After what felt like hours, I crawled over to the closet in the hallway. On the top shelf, behind a stack of old towels, was a shoebox. I pulled it down. Inside was my life with Ethan. Ticket stubs from our first movie. A dried rose from our first anniversary. A goofy photo booth strip from the state fair. And dozens of handwritten notes he'd left on my pillow or my car windshield over the years. "Can't wait to see you tonight. You're my everything. Future Mrs. Thompson." I ran my fingers over his familiar handwriting, the ink now a testament to a grand deception. This wasn't just a breakup. This wasn't a man who fell out of love. This was a conspiracy. A long con. My own family had held me down while the man I trusted robbed me blind, emotionally and financially. I picked up one last photo from the box. It was from New Year's Eve, just a few months ago. We were on my apartment balcony, glasses of champagne raised, smiling stupidly at the camera. I remembered his toast. "To 2025, he'd said, clinking his glass against mine. "The year we finally buy our house. The year it all begins. To us." Looking at his smiling face, at my own trusting, idiotic grin, something inside me shifted. The tears stopped. The deep, gut-wrenching sob subsided, replaced by a strange, icy calm. I looked at the man in the photo, this stranger who had shared my bed and my dreams, and I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt rage. A pure, clean, clarifying rage. Crying wasn't going to bring my money back. Crying wasn't going to undo the humiliation. Crying was what they expected. They expected me to fall apart, to become a tragic story they could tell their friends with performative pity. They expected me to be the victim. I would not be the victim. I stood up, my legs shaky but determined. I walked over to my laptop, opened it, and the screen illuminated my tear-streaked face. For a moment, my cursor hovered over the folder named Ethan and Me. My first instinct was to delete it all, to erase the last 5 years of my life. But I didn't. Instead, I created a new folder on my desktop. I typed one single word. Evidence. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I went back to social media, screenshotting every single wedding photo. The guests, the venue, the cake, the happy couple. I saved them all. I logged into my bank, downloaded the full statement showing the $80,000 theft, and saved the PDF. I went through my old emails, finding the ones where Ethan and I discussed our savings plan, our intention to use the money for a down payment. Proof. I scanned every birthday card from my mother where she called Ethan the son she never had. More proof. Each click was a small act of defiance. Each saved file was a brick in the wall I was building around my broken heart. I worked for an hour, my grief replaced by a cold, methodical purpose. When I was done, I had a neat, organized folder filled with the story of their betrayal. Their entire conspiracy, documented and undeniable. They thought they had left me with nothing. They were wrong. They had left me with a cause. I looked at the folder, at the mountain of their lies. And I knew what I had to do next. My hand was steady as I picked up my phone. I didn't look up a therapist. I didn't call a friend to cry on their shoulder. I opened my web browser and typed 3 words into the search bar. Best fraud lawyer. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me that you're with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement that fuels me to keep going. Please, comment with the number 1, and then listen as I tell you the rest of my story. The next morning, I walked into the office of a man named Arthur Davies. His firm was on the top floor of a glass skyscraper downtown, the kind of place that smells like money and quiet confidence. Mr. Davies was in his 60s, with sharp eyes and a handshake that could crush rocks. He didn't offer pity. He offered a strategy. I laid it all out on his gleaming mahogany desk. The bank statements, the emails, the screenshots of the wedding. I told him the whole story, my voice never wavering. He listened intently, occasionally making a note on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his leather chair and steepled his fingers. "Ms. Miller," he said, his voice calm and even. "What your former fiancé has done is not a simple matter of a broken heart. This is grand larceny. What your family has done is aid and abet a criminal conspiracy. They are complicit." Hearing my pain translated into the cold, hard language of the law was the most validating thing I had ever experienced. It wasn't just me being dramatic. It was a crime. "They think they're untouchable," I said. "My father is well known in this town. They have money. They have connections." A thin smile touched Mr. Davies' lips. "People like that often believe their own press. They have a lot to lose. Reputations, business deals, their standing in the community. That makes them vulnerable." He leaned forward. "We can sue for the return of your funds, plus punitive damages for emotional distress. It will be a fight. Are you ready for that?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I'm ready." Leaving his office, I felt like I had a sliver of power for the first time in my life. The next steps were brutal, but necessary. I went back to the apartment I had shared with Ethan, the one filled with his clothes, his books, his smell. I didn't cry. I packed. I was methodical. I hired movers and put all my furniture, my books, my entire life, into storage. I packed 2 suitcases with only the essentials. Everything else, every gift he had ever given me, every photo, every shared memory, I left it all behind in a pile in the middle of the living room. I dropped the keys on the counter, walked out, and never looked back. My job was understanding. I told my boss I was dealing with a severe family crisis and needed to resign. I had a decent salary and had been a top performer, so they offered me a leave of absence, but I refused. I couldn't stay in that city. Every street corner held a memory, a ghost of a life that had been a lie. I needed a clean break. A total reset. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Austin, Texas. I'd never been there before. That was the point. It was a place with no history, no ghosts. Just a future that I would have to build myself, from scratch. The first few months were a blur of cheap apartments, instant noodles, and job interviews. It was lonely. It was hard. There were nights I'd sit in my tiny, empty living room and the full weight of what I had lost would hit me, and I'd just stare at the wall for hours. But I never let myself fall back into that black hole of grief. Every time the sadness crept in, I would open my laptop and look at the evidence folder. It reminded me of my purpose. I got a job in marketing at a growing tech startup. The work was demanding, the hours were long, but I poured every ounce of myself into it. My focus was relentless. While my old friends were getting married and having babies, I was closing deals and rewriting marketing strategies. I was promoted within 6 months. All the while, I was working with Mr. Davies. We communicated through encrypted emails. I sent him every new piece of information I could find. He was building the case, methodically, piece by piece. My family had tried to contact me, of course. Dozens of voicemails from my mother, swinging between faint concern and angry demands that I stop this childish nonsense. A few terse emails from my father, threatening to cut me out of his will, a hollow threat, since I knew there was no inheritance for me anyway. I never responded. My silence was a wall they couldn't breach. One evening, about 8 months after I had moved, an email from Mr. Davies landed in my inbox. My heart jumped. The subject line was short, an obstacle. I opened it. My eyes scanned the text. Amelia, it read, their lawyer has responded to our initial demand letter. They are filing a motion to dismiss the case. They claim the $80,000 was a gift you willingly gave to Ethan to help him start his new life. They are claiming you were happily broken up and this lawsuit is a vindictive act from a jealous ex. We need more than the bank statements. We need something that proves his intent to defraud you, something that explicitly links the money to a shared future they knew about. Right now, it's your word against theirs. I leaned back in my chair, the air leaving my lungs. A gift. They were trying to twist my life savings into a generous parting gift. My word against the 4 of them. I felt a familiar cold dread creeping back in. For the first time, I wondered if they might actually get away with it. The lawyer's email felt like a punch to the gut. A gift. The word was so insulting, so dismissive of the 5 years of my life I had invested. For a week, I felt a kind of low-grade panic I hadn't felt since that first night. They were going to spin this. They were going to paint me as the crazy, vengeful ex-girlfriend, and with my father's reputation in that town, people would believe them. How could I possibly prove what was in Ethan's head? How could I prove they all knew? I was sitting at my kitchen table one Saturday morning, staring at a stack of legal documents and feeling hopeless, when the doorbell rang. It was a delivery driver with a small, heavy package. It was from an address I didn't recognize, sent from a small town in Vermont. I signed for it, confused. Inside the cardboard box was an old, velvet-covered jewelry box, faded with age. And a letter. I opened the letter first. The handwriting was elegant but shaky. It was from my great-aunt Margaret, my grandmother's younger sister. I hadn't seen her since I was a little girl. Dearest Amelia, it began. I heard through the family grapevine about the trouble you've been having. I am not surprised, but I am deeply sorry. Your mother has always been, well, she is who she is. Before your grandmother passed, she gave me this box. She made me promise to keep it safe until the right time. She said your mother would try to claim it, but that it was not for her. It was for her strongest granddaughter. My hands trembled as I read the last line. I opened the velvet box. Nestled inside on a bed of faded silk was my grandmother's necklace. A delicate platinum chain with a single, stunning diamond that caught the morning light and threw tiny rainbows across my kitchen. I remembered it from old photographs. My mother had always told me it was lost during a move years ago, that she was heartbroken over it. Another lie. My grandmother had seen me. In a way my own mother never had. She had known I was strong. Holding that necklace, feeling its cool weight in my palm, was like a shot of adrenaline to my soul. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a validation. It was a piece of my true inheritance, a legacy of strength passed down to me. It reminded me who I was. I was not a victim. I was my grandmother's granddaughter. The necklace didn't solve my legal problem, but it reignited my fire. That afternoon, determined to find something, anything, I started digging online. Not for legal documents, but for social proof. I started looking at the social circles my family ran in. And that's when I found it. It was an article on a local society blog. A fawning piece about my father, Richard Miller, and his tireless work for charity. The article centered on their biggest event of the year, the Miller family annual charity gala for the Children's Hospital. It was their crown jewel, the event that cemented their status as pillars of the community. The article quoted my father extensively. He talked about integrity, family values, and the importance of a good name. And then I saw the date. The gala was in 6 weeks. An idea, sharp and brilliant, lit up my mind. I had been trying to fight them in a courtroom, a private battle of lawyers and motions. But that wasn't where their power was. Their power was in their public image. Their reputation was everything. That was their Achilles heel. I thought about the guest list. The mayor, city council members, business leaders, all their wealthy friends and clients. All the people my father needed to impress. All the people my mother loved to hold court with. What would happen if their perfect, curated world was shattered in front of that exact audience? What would happen if their carefully constructed masks were ripped off in the one place they felt safest? I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer. Mr. Davies answered on the second ring. Mr. Davies, I said, my voice steady and sharp with a newfound purpose. Forget the motion to dismiss. Stop everything. I know how we're going to win this. And we're going to do it in public. The 6 weeks leading up to the gala were the most intense of my life. My plan was audacious, and Mr. Davies, after an initial moment of stunned silence, embraced it with the enthusiasm of a seasoned predator. He called it a public serving with maximum prejudice. First, we had to get me into the event. My father's company was a major sponsor, and their tables were reserved for high-level clients and city officials. But my own company, the tech startup in Austin, was growing fast. I went to my CEO with a proposal. I pitched a sponsorship package for the gala, framing it as a strategic move to build our brand's presence in a new market. I laid out the networking opportunities, the press coverage. I never mentioned my personal connection. I was all business. He approved it. My company bought a table. I was in. Next, the legal preparations. Mr. Davies drafted the official lawsuit summons. Not just for Ethan, but for Olivia, my mother, and my father. For separate documents, each detailing their specific role in the conspiracy and fraud. He hired a local process server, a discreet, professional man who understood the importance of timing. The plan was precise. The server would enter the ballroom at exactly 8:45 p.m., the peak of the evening, during my father's keynote address. As the day grew closer, a strange calm settled over me. The rage and the grief were still there, but they had been forged into something else, a tool. I flew back to California 2 days before the event. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I didn't stay at a cheap motel. I used the money from my first big commission check at my new job and booked a suite at the Fairmont, a historic, luxurious hotel overlooking the city. The girl who had fled the city in shame a year ago was gone. In her place was a woman with a purpose. That night, I ordered room service, sat by the window overlooking the glittering city lights, and went over the plan one last time. I felt a tremor of fear, a flicker of doubt. What if it went wrong? What if they somehow turned it around on me? Then, I opened the velvet box. I took out my grandmother's necklace. The diamonds seemed to glow in the lamplight. I clasped it around my neck. The cool metal on my skin was a grounding force. It was a reminder that I was not alone. I had the strength of the woman who came before me. The fear subsided, replaced by a cold, steady resolve. The night of the gala arrived. I took my time getting ready. I had bought a dress for the occasion. It wasn't black, the color of mourning. It wasn't red, the color of obvious revenge. It was a deep emerald green, the color of new growth, of money, of life. It was elegant and powerful. With my hair styled and the diamond necklace resting perfectly at my collarbone, I looked in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Her eyes weren't filled with tears, they were filled with fire. The drive to the venue was surreal. We passed restaurants where Ethan and I had celebrated anniversaries. We passed the park where he had proposed. They were just places now, scenes from someone else's life. The car, a sleek black town car I had hired, pulled up to the grand entrance of the ballroom. A valet opened my door. The lights were blinding. The sound of a live orchestra and the chatter of hundreds of people spilled out onto the steps. I could see the flash of cameras from the local press inside. It was everything they loved, a spectacle of their own importance. I took a deep breath, the cold diamonds of my grandmother's necklace resting against my skin, a silent piece of armor. And I walked inside. Walking into that ballroom was like stepping into a lion's den. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the low hum of self-congratulation. Chandeliers dripped crystals from the ceiling. Waiters in tuxedos moved through the crowd with trays of champagne. It was a perfect illusion of class and charity. Heads turned as I walked in. I saw the ripples of recognition, the whispers spreading from one small, gilded group to the next. Is that Amelia Miller? Richard's daughter? I thought she moved away. I ignored them. My eyes scanned the room, searching. And then I saw them. They were holding court near the main stage, the perfect family on display. My father, Richard, looked regal in his tuxedo, shaking hands with the mayor. My mother, Carol, was radiant in a silver gown, laughing that tinkling, fake laugh of hers. And next to her, holding hands, were Olivia and Ethan. Olivia was in a tight, sequined dress, looking smug. Ethan looked tired. He had a drink in his hand, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. Our eyes met across the crowded room. My mother's smile froze on her face. Her glass stopped halfway to her lips. I saw a flicker of pure panic in her eyes. My father followed her gaze, and his face hardened into a mask of cold fury. Olivia just looked shocked, her mouth slightly agape. And Ethan. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. He actually took a step back, pulling Olivia with him. I didn't approach them. I didn't need to. I gave them a small, slow smile. A smile that held no warmth, no forgiveness. A smile that said, I know everything. And I'm here. Then I turned my back on them, walked to my company's table, and took my seat. I could feel their eyes burning into my back for the rest of the hour. The dinner was a blur of polite conversation with my table mates. I ate my chicken, I drank my wine, and I waited. At 8:30 p.m., the lights dimmed. The master of ceremonies went to the podium and began a glowing introduction for the man of the hour, the philanthropist, the business leader, the family man, my father. He walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. He stood at the podium, basking in the adoration. He began his speech. Thank you, all of you, for being here tonight, he started, his voice booming through the speakers. When we talk about community, we are really talking about family. We are talking about integrity. We are talking about the values we pass down, the legacy we build. I watched the clock on my phone. 8:44. Just as my father was reaching the crescendo of his speech about honor and trust, I saw him. A man in a simple, well-tailored gray suit entered the ballroom from a side door. He was unremarkable, invisible. He moved with a quiet purpose, his eyes scanning the room. He was the process server. He walked directly toward the stage. A few people noticed, a low murmur starting in the crowd. My father, blinded by the stage lights, didn't see him at first. The man walked up the short set of stairs and approached the podium. My father stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening in confusion and then anger. "Excuse me," he hissed into the microphone. "This is a private event." The man in the gray suit didn't flinch. He simply extended a thick manila envelope. "Richard Miller," he said, his voice calm but firm, not captured by the mic but audible to the front rows. "You've been served." A collective gasp went through the ballroom. The man placed the envelope on the podium in front of my stunned father. Then he turned, walked down the stairs, and headed directly for my mother's table. He handed a second envelope to her. Her face went white as a sheet. He then moved to Olivia and Ethan's table. He placed one envelope in front of Olivia, who immediately burst into tears. And finally, he placed the last envelope directly in front of Ethan, who just stared at it as if it were a snake. "Ethan Thompson, you've been served." The ballroom erupted into chaos. The whispers turned into a roar. Cell phone cameras were everywhere, flashes going off like fireworks. My father stood frozen on the stage, the speech about his legacy forgotten. My mother looked like she was going to faint. My sister was sobbing uncontrollably. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. I took one last look at the wreckage of their perfect evening. At their legacy turning to ash right before their eyes. Then I stood up, smoothed down my emerald green dress, and walked out of the ballroom, leaving the symphony of their destruction behind me. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The next morning, the society blog that had once praised my father ran a new headline: "Miller Charity Gala Ends in Chaos as Family Served with Fraud Lawsuit." The story was everywhere. My lawyer had given an anonymous tip to the journalist I had identified, and she had run with it. The article included the damning details: the birthday betrayal, the drained savings account, the conspiracy. The story of my father's integrity was replaced by the story of his family's greed. They didn't stand a chance. Facing a public trial and the discovery process that would expose every single one of their financial and personal secrets, they folded. Mr. Davies called me a week later. They had agreed to settle. They would pay back every single cent of the $80,000, plus another $100,000 in punitive damages. They also had to sign a statement acknowledging the funds were not a gift, effectively admitting to their lie. There would be no messy divorce-style fight, no custody battle over lies. Just a quiet, humiliating defeat. The money appeared in my account 3 days later. But it was never about the money. It was about the truth. Their business suffered. Clients who valued discretion and a good name pulled away. Friends who had once flocked to their parties now crossed the street to avoid them. They had built their world on a foundation of appearances, and with one well-placed legal document, I had brought the whole house down. I stayed in Austin. My life continued to move forward. I got another promotion at work, eventually becoming the head of my department. I bought a small house with a big backyard in a quiet neighborhood. I made friends, real friends, the kind who showed up with soup when you were sick and celebrated your successes without a hint of jealousy. I built a family of my own choosing. A year to the day after the gala, on my 31st birthday, I hosted a party in my backyard. It wasn't a lavish affair. Just a dozen people, a grill full of burgers, and string lights twinkling in the warm Texas twilight. There was so much laughter. Before my friends arrived, I stood in my bedroom getting ready. I opened the old velvet box. My grandmother's necklace glowed against the silk. I clasped it around my neck. It no longer felt like armor. It just felt like it belonged. Looking at my reflection, I saw a woman who was happy. A woman who was at peace. The scars were still there, faint lines from a battle I had won, but they didn't hurt anymore. They were just a reminder of how strong I had become. My family had tried to lock me out, to leave me with nothing in the silence of their betrayal. But what they didn't realize was that when you lock someone out of a toxic, loveless prison, you aren't punishing them. You are setting them free. They had banished me, but I had found a home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but sharing it feels like the final step in closing that chapter of my life. If you've ever felt overlooked or betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you most, what was the moment you knew you had to stand up for yourself? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more. You are not alone.